So I came to this place where I was like, I still need to be that mother. And then on top of it, my husband had like lost his job. And so the salary and the healthcare insurance was all on me. So it wasn't even, I didn't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm going to step back or go 75%. So I said, okay, so how is this going to work? How, with all these spinning plates that I have, how am I going to be there as a mother? And I thought about it and I felt like it was a revelation, honestly. I realized the answer was time.
Mhm.
And it was the definition of what is time. So just like how I was going to navigate medicine was understanding that I was a healer
Mhm.
and that the white coat was an identity I could take on and off.
Mhm.
Understanding that time didn't have to be linear. The
Mhm.
time could be Einsteinian, it could be relative,
Mhm.
and that it's not about the the present. It's not about the amount of time, it's about your presence in that time.
All right, Dr. Yolanda, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm really excited to kind of dive deeper into your journey. I know that I speak to different physicians on a daily basis, and one of the things that really stood out to me is that you really embracing the community and even
Mhm.
so much really kind of branching out to live events in Portugal and retreats and things of that nature. So I really want to dive in on the business side, but also more importantly, get to know you as a human being and your journey from working as a nephrologist, right?
Right, yeah.
Into actually transitioning into pursuing your own calling. So, in our pre show notes, one of the things that stood out to me was that once you realized that you were enough,
Mhm.
you finally chose to go ahead and let go, right?
Yes.
So, talk to me about what does that mean for you and what was the process for you to really come to terms with you are enough?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bianca, for having me as a guest. And I'm kind of really excited about what you do because I think that too much as physicians, especially, who we are is completely tied up into that white coat we wear. And
Mhm.
that white coat becomes not just an identity that we can kind of take on and off, but it becomes almost like a shell and we're trapped into it. And so for me, that was definitely me. I felt very much trapped, not just because I had sacrificed so much, both in terms of time and money, and unfortunately, as we often do, and especially I think female healthcare providers, family time, and then forget self care. Like that was not even a thought, but just kid time, husband time, family time, all of that. So there's so much that we sacrificed for this white coat that the thought of taking it off by the time that I did, it was shellacked to me. It was like pieces of flesh to take this white coat off. And part of the journey I had in doing so was understanding that there's a different part of the white coat. So there's a white coat personification, and that is an identity. But underneath the part that I finally understood that I wished I had understood all along was that I was a healer,
Mhm.
and that the healer had nothing to do with a white coat, except that was just one extension of the way that I could heal. And
Mhm.
so once I understood that I was truly a healer, that that's actually what I believe I was born to be, that God gave me that, that that is part of my archetype. I came into this world as a healer, and how I chose initially to be a healer, and which I did for a long time and which I still love, is nephrology. And so I chose that white coat. I chose to go into medicine. I chose to go into a subspecialization for kidneys. And I worked with kidney patients and dialysis patients for over 20 years. I've been a doctor for way long, since 1998. Um, and so, but that was one personification of the healer. and it didn't define me. I could still be the healer without having a white coat. And it really helped because a lot of times when I was in the space of the white coat, there was a lot of moral injury that was also going on. It was me feeling I was constantly fighting the system to get my patients what they needed and what they wanted. And then with a lot of what is going on with social media, and unfortunately, distrust, and a lot of it in the system where we can't, I shouldn't say we can't, it is very difficult to navigate the kind of physician that you know your patients need and that really manifests physically as the healer.
Mhm.
And so I'm old enough that when I signed up for this, I did not sign up for computers. It was pencil or not pencil. It was a pen and paper.
Mm.
And so the difference with that, because I have a PhD in neuroscience, and so the difference with that is that you can maintain in flow state with a person while you're writing. You can be fully present as a healer
Mm.
and still have your white coat identity when you're writing. Because we've been writing since we were little and writing for so long that it's like breathing,
Mhm.
you know? No one has to really show you how to do it. Just have that. You look occasionally just to make sure that you're not writing there. It doesn't matter. Doctor's handwriting, everyone knows, is atrocious. So you are writing out your notes, and that is it. You cannot do that. You cannot be present for the patient in the same healing space when you're working on a computer because the amount of brain energy and focus, especially when there's all these little boxes to move the mouse and to do these boxes and do this, does not allow you to be in that same flow and energy.
Mhm.
And so it becomes this constant battle between you as a person, as the healer, and how do you navigate in this system that makes it does make it difficult. And there are ways. It is actually possible. I finally figured it out,
Mhm.
but it is very difficult. And for the most part, there's a lot of moral injury. And so when you're in that space where the healer in you feels horrible putting on that white coat, can you imagine there were days where when I put on this white coat, I just felt it in like the pit of my stomach. Like I felt bad. And it wasn't until I figured out that my archetype, who I was running against who I felt like I had to be, that I could say, okay, this is who I am. I'm never going to sacrifice the healer part. How can I be the healer and have my white coat on?
Mhm.
And once I figured that out, then it became smooth and became fun again. And I
Yeah.
became enough because I was enough.
Mhm. So, talk me through how exactly you did that. How did you realize that? How did you be able to navigate through the moral injury while you still had the white coat on and not tie yourself to that identity in order for you to continue working through that profession for another 6 years?
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. So the one thing that helped me actually was having children. And then one of my kids has autism. And so all of a sudden my life became really chaotic and really a mess.
Mhm.
And the only thing that I held more sacred than my patients was my kids,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm that kind of mom that, like, yes, for sure, I'd step in front of a car and they could have both of my kidneys. I would no way, like, they could have both of them.
Mhm.
And so, when I was caught up in this place where all of a sudden there wasn't that many hours in the day to be present with them, it was becoming very difficult. I had actually become diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and the actual fatigue and the workload was hard. And so I came to this place where I was like, I still need to be that mother. And then on top of it, my husband had like lost his job. And so the salary and the healthcare insurance was all on me. So it wasn't even, I didn't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm going to step back or go 75%. So I said, okay, so how is this going to work? How, with all these spinning plates that I have, how am I going to be there as a mother? And I thought about it and I felt like it was a revelation, honestly. I realized the answer was time.
Mhm.
And it was the definition of what is time. So just like how I was going to navigate medicine was understanding that I was a healer
Mhm.
and that the white coat was an identity I could take on and off.
Mhm.
Understanding that time didn't have to be linear.
Mhm.
The time could be Einsteinian, it could be relative,
Mhm.
and that it's not about the the present. It's not about the amount of time, it's about your presence in that time.
Mhm.
So if I'm with you and I'm holding that space and I'm talking to you and you feel this attention, time is suspended. And it's suspended because that connection that we have truly elongates it.
Mhm.
So if I'm there and I come home with my kids and I spend an extra 5 minutes in the car and I answer all my texts and answer all my emails and I walk through the door and I hand my husband my pager. So even if I was on call, I handed my husband my pager and I said, for the next 10 minutes, if anyone calls, unless it's life threatening, take a message.
Mhm.
Right. So I was there. So my kids knew as soon as I walked in the door, there wasn't Dr. Bogart or Yolanda, it was mommy.
Mhm.
And they always remember that mommy came through the door.
Mhm.
And, I always tease my clients. I say, okay, so when your kids are playing video games and it's 15 minutes, how long is it in their hand? It's like 5 seconds, right? If
Mhm.
they're doing chores and it's 15 minutes, it's like 6 hours.
Right, right, right,
It's the same 15 minutes. It's about
right,
what you're doing. And
right.
so when you realize that you can play with time, that you have all the time in the world for everything that it is that you want and you need to do.
Mhm.
And that time gets to be another dimension, like another type of identity. It's the energy that you come into when you bring and you sit down with a patient and you will sit there and you look at them and they know that you see them, right?
Mhm.
I see you. And
Absolutely.
being seen by anyone, especially someone that cares for you, is a great gift. And it's a beautiful
Absolutely.
healing gift. And so when
Absolutely.
I realized that, okay, there's these time blocks within my patient appointment that I'm going to make sure is sacred. That I'm going to make sure that they feel seen. And then I can say to them, "Okay, now I'm switching and doing my computer thing." And
Mhm.
everyone knows, and I would tease with them, "You know when I'm doing my computer thing, I can't look at you."
Right, right.
Right? And I would switch over and I would do my computer thing and then I would switch back. And so the piece of me that was the healer had that satisfaction of seeing the patient being seen, of getting that connection and and understanding that. And it's honestly something I wish I'd been taught in medical school.
Yeah, it's almost like you have the consciousness to really just step away from your who you thought you were in those moments, right? And you empowered yourself and you had the ability to take control of what you were doing and creating the space to leverage the time or the experience that you're having with that specific individual. So it's almost like you're just empowering yourself to take control of what is happening in your life at that very moment, which then helps you kind of separate from the identity and step into more of a conscious space. Um, is that the work that that almost kinda took you through being able to fully release, like, the identity of being just a physician in nephrology and then transitioning into being a healer somewhere else? Because ultimately, you didn't see yourself as only an occupation, you saw yourself as a
Yeah.
healer. So once you were able to understand that, then in the way that you healed, you weren't so attached to.
Right. So a lot of that also was my journey with Miguel, who's my son with autism,
Mhm,
because at one point he wasn't really talking. There was a lot of behavior issues. It was a lot, and,
mhm,
I had been raised culturally, and I'm Puerto Rican Dominican, first generation, and it was all about, like, outcome, 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 you know? It was the classic, I brought home a 95%, and, my mom would be like, "What happened to the other 5%?"
right.
So, A plus plus wasn't enough,
Mhm,
when I was in elementary school, it was A plus plus with the stickers and, like, a big smiley face, and that
mhm,
was maybe okay.
mhm,
And so, in medicine, that's how we're trained. Everything is outcome based. Everything's about your patients getting to this score, patients doing this. And the truth of the matter is that it gives a fallacy that you as a physician have all this control over how a patient does.
mhm,
And it doesn't give the agency to the patient that mirrors their background, their cultural, their experience, what
mhm,
they have gone through and what they are going through. You can't talk to someone about their journey and why they have, you can't talk to someone about why their phosphorus, which is like a blood test when they're on dialysis, is so high without understanding that they're on a very, very limited amount of money and
mhm,
that the only thing they can afford is processed foods, which is incredibly high in phosphorus.
mhm,
So if you're sitting there and you're not understanding their journey and where they are, and all you're doing is talking about outcome, which is their number is X and it needs to be here,
mhm,
then all you're doing is introducing shame. And
mhm,
there is nothing healing about shame,
right.
you know? And
And I think
so
one of the conversations I have consistency is about the amount of time that physicians do have with their patients where they don't feel necessarily able to dive deeper into understanding, the entirety of what is going on in the patient's lives and what is causing these type of limitations. But when you described being able to kind of bend time and understand that it's not linear and not focused on the overall objective or the overall vision, because that can feel overwhelming and daunting, really kind of honing in on what is the experience that I can provide for this patient at this very moment and knowing that that is enough and going, using whatever space you have
yeah.
to really take the time to even go one extra step deeper is enough, and you don't have to feel, like, tied to the complexity of, like, the entire system, or, overwhelmed that you can't fix the entire, you know, breakdown of what's going on. It's like, "Well, let me take control of what I do have control over, and that's just really helping this specific person feel seen and heard, and knowing that what I'm doing in this moment, in this function is enough, and I'm not responsible for the overall outcome."
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. And it really does portray that. It's about the being detached to outcome because there's so many factors and variables that you can't control and being deeply attached to what you can control, which
Mhm,
is your care, which is your compassion, which is your education, which is your knowledge, and you doing your best as the best healer that you can be to give that.
mhm,
And this feeling of if you do that, no matter what the outcome is, because guess what? As a nephrologist, my patients are going to die. My patients are going to have some tragic outcomes. There are young people who are gonna go on to dialysis that never did anything wrong in their lives, you know? And it is hard. But when you are detached from the outcome, when you understand your own limitations, you can hold the container for a patient to be angry or sad, for parents to be grieving and upset. You can hold that container and you can even cry with them. I cry with my patients, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm crying here, but
No,
totally.
I understand. I feel your energy.
You know, and I laugh with them. I have a lot of fun. You can do all of that and not feel bad. And
Mhm,
I tell you, one of my last patients I had was, a 17-year-old. I started with him when he was 17. He'd gone through 3 different kidney doctors, so it was his 3rd one, and, he had an autoimmune disease. He had, uh, a focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, like FSGS,
mhm,
um, and it it was super difficult um, to treat, and it ended up not being treatable. I mean, I even had him on some experimental protocols that I got him on, and the last biopsy, I brought him back and we put his mom on the line, and that was it. There was nothing on his kidney biopsy. He was going to go on dialysis. He was in a college, actually the same college as my daughter, and he knew
mhm,
my daughter. And I tell you, Bianca, 5 years ago, for sure 10 years ago, that would have triggered me. That experience with that boy, I would not have been able to sleep for weeks. I would have been going over and over again. Could I have done this? Could I have done that? And instead, I could cry with him and be sad, but I understood I had done everything possible.
mhm,
I had really made sure, and I reached out to everyone and I asked the experts. There was nothing more that I could have done for this boy. And it was not about me.
mhm.
It was about him. And so I could sit there and be sad with him and hold that and move on and still feel that I was enough as a healer, that I had
Mhm.
done everything I could.
Absolutely. What is your definition of a healer? How were you able to function in being a healer, knowing that in the work that you do, your patients are eventually going to pass? Because when I think about like if you might think, okay, I'm a healer, so in that case, we're using healer in a way of like I'm going to cure you of
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, right? But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily what the
No.
meaning is.
Right.
So describe what does mean being a healer mean to you?
Yeah. So, that's a great question. I never really thought it that way because to me, being a healer is very different than being the doctor that I was trained to be,
Right.
although it didn't end up being the doctor that I end up being. So to
Mhm.
me, a healer is a guide. So I'm your guide along this journey, and I get to know you as your guide
Mhm.
because when you hire a guide, when you decide to do that, they find out where is it that you want to go? How is it that you're going to get there? What is it that you need to have? And it's about your journey and where you want to go, not about
Mhm.
my journey.
Mhm.
Okay. So, as a healing guide, it's not about the end point,
Mhm.
it's about all the destinations within.
Mhm.
And I feel very privileged to be on people's journeys.
Mhm.
Some of it may be that I do have a lot of faith and I don't think that death is the end. Some of it is A lot of it is also I don't think death is the worst thing that we do for people. There are
Mhm.
a lot of other things that are worse than death that we do.
Mm. Mhm.
And I am their guide. I don't, for example, if a patient goes on to hospice, I don't refer them I mean, I refer them to a palliative care person if they want to, and I encourage that because I think that's a great relationship. A lot of my patients don't, and I tell them, "You chose me as your
Mhm,
doctor. I'm I'm not gonna leave you, or you don't get
mhm,
to leave me just because you're at the end."
mhm,
Right? I can walk you through and work with a hospice nurse.
mhm.
Why would I leave my patients at the very end of their journey?
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
and that to me is what a healer is.
I love that, because I had a recent conversation with one of my clients about the difference between spiritual advisement and being a spiritual guide. And a guide is somebody that kind of walks you through the process, whereas like advisement is the one who teaches you the principles, and you can do both, right?
Mhm.
But I like that description of a healer is really just a guide, but ultimately you're allowing them to do what they need to do from themselves. You're not telling them exactly what it is that they should do. You're just guiding them through that healing
Yeah.
process. Um
And I wanna, like, add one thing to that because 'cause I'm a firm believer, I'm a huge human people optimist, and
mhm,
I'm actually a firm believer that if you give people agency and if you give them tools and
mhm,
you help them figure out the carrot that they've wanted all along, like, what is their carrot, that
mhm,
they will move mountains,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I've actually seen that. I've seen people do their own miracles, and they're always like,
Absolutely.
"Thanks, Doctor Bogart, 'cause blah, blah," and I was like, "I didn't do anything, like, you did it all." So, I think that's a really important concept, and I think that it's sometimes as physicians, we get, so overwhelmed, right? You're like, "How" and I remember feeling this way too, like, "How am I supposed to do X, Y, and Z on top of everything else?" And
Mhm.
the answer is, it's when you teach a man to fish, you're not having to fish for them their whole life.
Right, absolutely.
And so it's this concept of giving people agency and seeing that and figuring helping them figure out what their carrot is because then they really move, and
Right,
then the outcome just comes naturally
right.
because when you have a motivated, empowered patient that moves mountains, it's like, wow, yeah, their
Exactly.
A1C is gonna go from 14 to 6.
That's really powerful because as the physician, they're looking for answers through you. Well, they're getting answers through you, but they're looking for answers from you. But instead, being their guide, you're allowing them to find go through the process to find the answers themselves, which is ultimately how, we go through this journey is this is our journey. It's not for someone else to kind of guide you through or to tell you how to do it. Um, so yeah, that's beautiful. Um, I interviewed an emergency medicine physician recently, and she said that it wasn't until after she started her healing journey that she realized that her default was to live in anxiety. So she didn't even realize that there was another mode or that she had or there was permission to actually go to another mode because she was always at default. And she didn't realize that until she actually already left emergency medicine. And I know that you specialize in working with medical moms. And my goal is really to help people understand that they need to take agency of their lives while they're in this specific space. But how do we get them to recognize that this is not to be normalized while they're working in their profession? And so that they don't have to wait until they're completely burnt out or they finally let go of their careers to really wake up and realize it.
Yeah. I think for me, this was a really hard thing to learn.
Mhm,
Um, and the analogy I have is that if you're not careful, medicine is like a special needs kid that just is really, really sick. And there's no way as a parent that you ever feel that you can give enough to it. And it will
mm,
just take and take and take. So the answer is it's not a special needs kid. You know? That is the answer. And, I think setting your own boundaries and figuring out what you need, is really tough. I had the blessing of having a special needs child. so I had the blessing when Miguel was diagnosed in 2005 of understanding that, um, holy crap, like, the way I'm working, my work ethic.
Mhm.
And I had a child before Miguel. I had Sophia was 3 when Miguel was born, and then he was diagnosed at 2. And so it wasn't that there wasn't any other child, but what I would do is I would, spend all these inordinate amount of hours at work. I would have this incredible presence for my kids, and then I would do whatever work needed to be done when they went home. Now, some of this was easier because there wasn't as much of the computer stuff as there is now. And with the computer stuff, with the advent of, you know, um, I had a big old huge pager. It was not like the fancy pagers that they have now
Mhm.
that can find you on the moon. You know, people had cell phones, but the way it was being used was different. And so
Mhm.
there wasn't this feeling of 24/7. Um, that being said, when Miguel was diagnosed and I had to put some energy into that, I had to figure out how to um, cut out the things um, working that didn't make a lot of sense. And
Mhm.
so I started outsourcing some of these boxes. And so I think there's a lot of ego and a lot of the medicine telling you, you should be able to do all of this. You should be able to do all of that.
Mhm.
And I was like, I can't. And some of it came back later because then I was diagnosed with MS. That some of the difficulty I was having physically was literally clicking the boxes.
Mhm.
And so that was another blessing because all of a sudden I was like, okay, what am I doing? If I don't change what I'm doing, I will literally not be able to work in 5 years. So in 2008, I was like, okay, I'm going to outsource some of this like stuff that a lobotomized monkey could do, right?
Mhm.
It does
Right.
not need an MD, PhD. It doesn't even need an MD. It doesn't even need an adult, right? A lobotomized monkey can do some of these clicks. And so I outsourced it, and it wasn't that much money. It was like $10,000 a year to outsource all the clicks, all the dialysis appointments I had to put in, like so much administrative burden stuff
Mm.
that the cost to my soul, the cost to me clicking boxes where I'm like, okay, literally, if it wasn't for HIPAA, my 12-year-old, I could have paid her like a couple dollars per hour and she could have done all of that super fast.
Mhm.
And so I think we don't allow ourselves to feel that we're enough, or we feel that, well, it's embarrassing. Everybody else seems to be able to do it, but I need to get some help. And I think that's get over yourself. That's get over yourself.
Yeah.
Outsource the things. Business people figured this out for forever, right?
Yeah.
Why are we paying somebody who's an MD to do this? We're paying somebody who's an MD to do this because they do it on their own time and they sacrifice their own self-care to do it.
Mhm.
A business person would not put up with this. A
Yeah,
business
and
person
most of the time they're provided with that
uh,
admin assistant or whoever because that they
exactly.
know that that's possible, but for whatever reason they want MDs to not only heal through their work and do their work, but also do this outside of their office hours, which is
Well,
wild
because
to
it's
me.
it's 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 cheap. It's all about
Yeah,
money. It's
and that
all
just
about
is
the
it's
button.
automatically included. They think that that's just part of the roles and the responsibility of the
Ex
job.
exactly, and,
And
so when I did that, all of a sudden, things began to unwind, not unravel, but unwind, right? That tight knot that I had of me began because I was like, "Okay, now I have a little bit more time, and now at least what I'm doing is more my level," you know?
yeah. No, I'm so happy that you brought this up because this is very practical because I know we went really depth and now this is very practical. I am not opposed to working and coming in on the organization side through the career development work that I do. However, I prefer to work with the individual, even
Mhm.
though it's a lot more work. It just feels as though that's where I really want the empowerment to come from, because what you did is you're not waiting for an organization to figure it out for you, and
Right,
that's the time a lot of the complaints is like they're doing this or the system is set up this way. You took a look at, okay, what do I need to do to start easing up the load, right? It goes back to
right,
like, what can I do in this very moment to start really easing up the load? And you're like, okay, what I can do is these are the administrative things that I'm doing that I'm an MD. I don't like I can hire somebody else to take this over. And then you invested in
for
actually getting
myself.
your own time back.
Right,
Yes. And
exactly.
it's unfortunate that you had to do it yourself, but essentially it's giving people the agency and the power to actually take control. What are you doing that you can outsource? And you don't have to be an entrepreneur to do this. You can do this being fully employed. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, that's great. Did you just this was something that sparked your own like, how did you come up with this idea? Because sometimes when you're in a container, you don't even realize that these things are even possible. It's like you're just kind of functioning as normal.
I mean, this is the blessing of, I had a son with autism and I had MS,
Mhm.
and I literally just had to figure it out. And
Mhm.
so, and one of my strengths is I'd like to think outside of the box. This is my strength. 17 years ago, with Miguel, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, and I went into this is where I pulled my PhD for neuroscience, and I did all this reading, and I came back and I remember telling the experts a month later, there is no such thing as Asperger's.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, there is no such thing. Actually, there is. There are people who really can't have emotion, but that's not what autism is. Like my little guy, and this was another thing too, where people were trying to tell me that he didn't have emotion or he couldn't understand emotion. And I was like, no. What I clearly observed as a scientist from my child was that he felt emotion so much that it was even a small amount of emotion was very triggering.
Mhm.
And when you're triggered, what do you do? Fight, flight, or freeze,
Mhm.
right? So that's what he would do: fight, flight, or
Mhm.
freeze.
Mhm.
And same thing. So with Asperger, so I was just like, it's a spectrum. And so since it's a spectrum, just like an A1C for diabetes, you can move that along up and down,
Right.
and I'm going to move him along up and down. So, I'm really excited about this community I'm building, like medical moms that have kids with autism spectrum disorder, because there's so many fantastic little practical tips and advice that I had to figure it out because I had to figure it out
Mhm.
because I didn't
Mhm.
have any choice. And I think that's actually the journey that God put me on to
Mhm.
help all this kind of stuff. Um, there were days where I've suffered from severe depression even before MS, and then depression is very common with MS. And then, things were hard. And there were just days where I didn't want to get out of bed. And then I was like, okay, this is this is crazy. I'm spending 30 minutes to get my butt out of bed.
Mhm.
I could be doing 30 minutes something else. And so I
Mhm.
developed very much this morning routine of like, all right, my alarm went off. I hit a 2-minute counter. It was like 2-minute deep breathing, 2-minute gratitude, 2-minute of like, what are the top 3 things I need to do that day? And I was like, I don't care if I have a million.
Mm.
I'm only going to do
Right.
3 things. What are the
Mhm.
top 3 things? And then who is the woman that I need to be to do that? And I would
Mhm.
envision this woman, right? So, if I had to bake a birthday cake, I was going to be Ina Gardner.
Mhm.
If I had to, um, you know, advocate for a patient on a system level, I was going to be RBG.
Mhm.
And I would dress that way. So everyone knew Dr. Bogart came into the dialysis unit with her black suit, red shirt, and pearls.
Mhm.
Something was going down.
Right. You're some We're gonna have a conversation today. And I think this ties back to the original question of like, how do we help people understand that they need to take agency while they're in their career, and that this default of anxiety and nervous system overload is not to be normalized. And it seems like for you really are taking these what other people would view as challenges as really truly blessings to really start taking control of your life and figuring out what it is you need to do to adjust, right? And so it
Right.
gets to the point where, and this is almost, divine. It gets to the point where
Mhm.
you are in these spaces and you realize there might be need to be a change, but in order for you to actually take action, there's going to be little things that pop up in your life that seem like challenges, but are really being placed there for you to actually start moving, right? And so that's essentially what you call blessings, which they very much are. Is these blessings allowed me to reconsider what it is I was doing, how I was living my life, trying to find joy, try to figure out what are the little things I can do to get up within those 30 minutes and start becoming the person that I need to become. Um, Go ahead.
No, so I was gonna say, I think, what you're talking about is really profound because what we're talking about is that sort of activation energy to get to that threshold of change.
Mhm,
And for people who are physicians or healthcare providers, we've gone through so much in our life. We are so used to pain that that threshold, that activation energy that we need to produce a small change for ourselves that we view as kind of unnecessary or selfish or with shame because everybody else seems to be doing that is so high that we never allow ourselves to get there. And instead, if we take out the shame and we say, okay, well, everybody else can be jumping off a cliff. I'm going to not,
mhm,
right? Just like we tell our kids, I'm going to not, right?
mhm,
Um, I'm going to see what I can do to kind of outsource, right? So it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. And, it doesn't matter that I could do it. I choose to work smarter, not harder.
mhm,
Right. So why should I be doing things that I don't enjoy? Where I figured out the number of hours and I figured out how much I was getting paid and I
mhm.
figured out how much those hours cost and then what it would cost to outsource, and it was a
Right,
no-brainer,
right.
right? So take out the emotion for these things
Mhm,
because guess what? You're not only not are you, like, not a bad person, not only are you actually good enough, not only and this is a trick I get. For me, it's actually easy for my community because I have my community is moms that have kids that have autism, right? That they're
mhm,
on this autism spectrum. So I get to use a little bit of mom guilt to help them get there, right? Like this is all this time back that you can use for your kids. And the real work becomes, right? It's not just about the kids. It's
right,
about you.
right,
And this is where I push people because people think that they can do all of this stuff and that they can be present as a healer they want to be. And that's absolutely wrong. The healer and the mom and the person you want to be starts out with the energy that you give.
right.
And there is no way that you are walking into that room completely frazzled, completely spent from your previous patient. Are you okay with your eye?
I'm
Because
good, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no.
I'm like, "There's something in
I'm
my
talking
eye."
about being present, and
Yeah.
we have to
No, I'm
acknowledge that you
listening.
have an eyelash in your eye and that it
I think
hurts.
I had a little eyelash in my eye, but
Yeah, I
but,
know, we needed to stop and take a time.
yeah,
Alright.
let me just get this towel really quick.
Yeah.
Like, what is going my eyelash? I
No.
think I just had a little
I'm
eyelash.
sitting here talking about being present and being
No, no,
compassionate,
you're fine.
then
No, 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 no,
like,
no. No worries.
your your eye is dying. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, if we don't have 30 seconds to get an eyelash taken out during a
Yeah.
podcast,
No, I know, it's totally fine.
then there's that I really shouldn't be sitting here coaching
Yeah.
people. So, you know, what what we miss by not doing these things and getting on that should bus and that
Mhm.
shame bus and wanting to do it all, what we miss is that that impossibility doesn't allow for the most important thing, and the most
Mhm.
important thing is the energy that you bring in when you are working with people. The
Mhm.
energy is a healer that you bring in when you're working with your patients. The energy is a healer that you bring in when you're working with your kiddos, right?
Mhm.
If you're a healer in all aspects of life. I'm a
Mhm.
healer when I walk down the street and smile at people.
Right.
I see them. I see the
Right.
container.
Mhm.
And so that energy is the most important thing. And
Mhm.
you can only bring in that healing energy if you have time and have healed yourself.
Mhm.
You you don't fool yourself. Don't think that no one's going to notice because that feeling as human beings, right? That's that 4 microsecond that people have that they judge you for who you are as soon as they see you. It's not what you say or what you
Mhm.
do, is who you are. And
Mhm.
that presence when you come in, when you are present because you yourself are healed, you yourself have joy, you yourself can give, that's everything. And I learned that from Miguel
Mhm.
because I thought my daughter has, and she does, she has like one of the highest emotional intelligence of anyone I know.
Mhm.
You know, someone said she could be at the age of 4, she could be a UN negotiator.
Mhm.
But my son with autism, his part of his brilliance is those guys are like little Geiger counters for emotion. So you don't see or feel or hear anything, and they feel it. They pick it up. And so learning how to hold the container for my son, how to be present, and how to take away like all of this emotion that was even the emotion of wanting, because the emotion of wanting places a burden on someone,
Mhm.
right? That emotion of wanting your patient to have a perfect phosphorus
Mhm.
puts that burden and therefore shame. And
Mhm.
so learning with Miguel of how to hold a container and accept and love him unconditionally for who he was at that moment and not bringing in this wanting and this outcome really just allowed me to do that for my patients and then for myself.
Mhm. Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I want to go into the community that you're speaking of. So you are enabling medical moms to balance care, careers, and autism parenting, reclaim their time, their energy, and their emotional wellness. So walk us through what we know the symptomology, for lack of a better word, that someone is experiencing before they come to you, but walk us through the process of actually connecting with you, and then what do they gain for being a part of your community?
Yeah. So, thank you so much. So, first of all, if there are any female healthcare providers that are listening to this who have a kiddo with on the autism spectrum, or if you know of anybody with that, please, please, please. I this is a huge need to build this community. There's very few of them because this community is not about the kids. I'm going to just put that out there. And I
Mhm.
know that in this community, we're going to talk about our kids because we're moms, but it is not about the kids. It is about us as the mothers. Because my huge belief is that the reason why Miguel could transform to from being like almost like nonverbal to now reading the Iliad and the Odyssey and Shakespeare and sitting in and us having great conversations and him having friends and he's going to college on scholarship, like all of that, the primary ingredient for that was first, which I didn't know at the beginning. I didn't have, right? That was part of my journey,
Mhm.
was if I could have known what I knew later, and but which I did, which was to figure out how to hold the container for him by processing my emotions.
Mhm.
We underestimate the power of as parents for that co-emotional regulation, how important that is, and it is even more important for neurodivergent kids than it is for our neurotypical kids.
Mhm.
It is so important. And so in this community, I want us to focus on us. I want us to heal ourselves first. I want to be there as a supportive community for that. And yeah, you're gonna get a lot of tips because like I said, first generation, like New Rican, I am all about tips,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
all about kind of things that are easy to do, that are easy to implement, that are small m- mind changes, because I believe that everything happens as baby steps.
Mhm.
And for example, one thing I did was I had I called it a ritual that I would have between each patient that was just 30 seconds. And it was just a couple of deep breaths. And then I would put my hands over my heart and I would say to myself, I am the healer that this patient needs. And you can say, I am the doctor that this patient needs. But
Mhm.
what that would do is that would really shift my mindset, where I was done with one patient and I would go into the next room and it was about that patient.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of tips that you're going to get, a lot of like ways to structure your days, your mornings, your in betweens, so that you can have a day that's more flow, that's more joy, and then come back home and be more present for your kiddo.
Mhm.
And use those kind of same techniques with your children.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And one of the common themes that I'm noticing just in the few short weeks that I've been really hearing other physician stories is the need to unlearn. So there's so many types of communities and coaching offers and things in the marketplace, and we're being fed information on a daily
Yeah.
basis that, even though they're going to receive the tips that they need to really process. I think healing is first and foremost focusing on yourself, right? So that you do have that capacity to pour into other people in your profession and your family, but also a space to really unlearn the conditioning and the things that it kind of goes back to like the shame, like unlearning the way that they think they're
Yeah.
supposed to show up in their lives and their careers, right? And kind of unveiling some of the conditioning that you've gone through. I think that that is really powerful, and that's what the communities are serving without the messaging really interpreting it that way, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
like
and
go ahead.
I have a coaching course that I will be starting out in January, and I'm
Uh-huh.
super excited about it. It's like an 8-week course, and it's gonna have, for my, pilot people, a lot of one-on-ones with me, but also
Mhm.
kind of weekly sessions with the group, and it's this whole modules of course.
Uh-huh.
Um, and, I mean, there is a sense of, I wouldn't call it so much like unlearning or deprogramming. Um, the way I like to view it is that, when you see these pictures that you look and you say, oh, it's a vase. And then
Mhm.
someone says, okay, but I see two women,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Two women's faces. A
Yeah.
lot of that is understanding that what we've been taught is almost the negative, and that there's a
So
way of
changing.
looking at yeah, so it's a change
Right.
of a reframe.
So explain to you because your background is in neuro. So explain to us like the definition of feeling the need to unlearn
And
or
then
deprogram versus changing your perspective or changing
mhm.
the way that you see things.
Yeah, so, that's a great question. I hope we answer it.
Cuz that's what I've been
Putting
calling
me
it
on
is
the
like
spot.
this
It's been a
this
long
need
time
to
since I've
unlearn.
usually. No, so a lot of it is it's a little bit of a pun, but it's exactly what we just talked about. So a reframe for your brain is far easier, and part of that is because it brings in a component, an element of surprise. So surprise for us as human beings is something that, boom, our dopamine goes up. right?
Mhm.
Anytime we have a surprise. Even if it's a bad surprise, right? That's why some
Mhm.
people love horror films and to go to those, like, scary things for
Yeah.
Halloween, and they love that, right? Because it's that surprise. And then if you have a surprise and it's surprise and it's a good surprise or it's an unexpected surprise, your brain really fires off that dopamine and it really is imprinted.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's what happens when you reframe. All of a sudden, you're taking a look at something that you thought you knew and you're seeing it in a new light. And your brain is like, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Mhm.
When you have to unlearn something, I mean, just even think about you're thinking about unlearning something. You're like,
Mhm.
holy crap, I learned this and it didn't serve me. And now I have
Yes.
to unlearn it and learn
Yes.
something new. And it sounds
Yes.
tedious because it is. And who wants to do that all day long? Right. And so
Yeah.
that's the difference. I'm taking what we already know and I'm shifting it slightly so you look at it in a different light and you use the power of your brain and surprises and joy to ignite that want and desire to go on.
I love that. Thank you so much for that explanation because it almost feels like even like to go further, it feels like when you talk about unlearning and just I didn't really have the words to put to it at the time in my own journey, but it almost feels like I was questioning reality.
Mhm.
So, what is real? I mean, I feel like when I got to the point where I was supposed to be at the pivotal of my career and I've accomplished the vision that I set for
Right.
myself. And this is the end point, essentially, which now we know there's no end point, right?
Right.
But essentially, this was the end point because it's checking all the boxes. Everything is in place, and I spent years doing it. But my fulfillment levels, my energy levels, I'm almost in a depression. So it's not equating. So to me, it caused me to question my reality and the things that I've been told. So then for me, I'm like, I have to now embark on this journey to figure out what is real and what is not real. And it is a tedious process, but to think about it like, let me just reframe things for you. And then also, I've been able to get into the space of like, two things can be true. Like, it could
Mhm.
be this and that.
No.
And just simplifying it because it was such an overhaul in like what it is I wanted to go out and do because now I have to question. I can't believe anything that people are telling me. I have to experience it now to really fully understand, which is essentially what triggered my awakening and allowed me to go onto this journey to really kind of figure out things for myself. And now that I'm reached a more grounded place in my life,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
understanding it's like it's more simple. Like, okay,
Mhm.
this could
Mhm.
be true and this can be true, you know? So I like the simplicity of like just reframing things and looking at it from a different perspective. And like you said, giving your brain that dopamine to just kind of have that element of surprise, like, oh, okay, I never really looked at it that way.
Yeah,
But
and
someone, in order for you to enjoy that experience, you do have to go in with this open mind.
and I think some of that is the community and having someone who is
Hmm.
frankly, that's where a coach helps you because
Yes.
it's okay if you're not there yet. It's
Right.
not about where you are, right? Everyone starts in their own place and their
It's
own
true.
journey. Everyone has a different story. So it's not about where you should be or what you should be doing. It's just about you are where you are.
Right.
And it doesn't mean at all that that's where you need to end up.
Right. That's true. Very true.
And since I personally feel like everything in life happens for a reason and that
Hmm.
everything the only time it's not a blessing is if you don't learn what you should have learned from it. And
And in
so
that case, you're gonna go through it again so you can
yeah,
learn again.
work harder, yeah, right,
But
it's
that's
like
very
if the
beautiful,
universe
it's
taps you on a shoulder and you don't listen, at some point, it's gonna be a 18-wheeler Mack truck, and
yeah.
I don't want these moms to go through this because I was hit with a lot of different 18-wheeler Mack trucks. I
Mhm,
know if I'd been a different person or I'd been the person I was now, I wouldn't have had multiple sclerosis.
mhm,
I wouldn't have been that person who needed to do it all. I wouldn't have been that person who had to fix everything. I wouldn't be that person where it was all outcome based. I mean, it was all stress, you know,
Mhm,
um, and it wouldn't have happened. I have a lot of gratitude that it did because it
mhm,
forced a lot of changes for me, and it
mhm,
forced me to, at some point, to say, "Okay, I'm going to retire from doing full-time on-call nephrology because it's too hard on my body." Um, and I still want to be a healer, and I still want to get this information out, and I still wanna practice, but it'll be different than, like, that full-time kind of, practice. So, there are so many things and there's so many moms out there that this information can literally change their life instantly. There are things that you can do that from day one will make things better. Everything in life is baby steps,
mhm. That
right?
is true, and I think a community does help you open your eyes to this as well. Like you said, it's all about meeting people where they are, and someone, like you said, that may not necessarily be there yet, there's something that is attracting them to this message.
Right.
There's some type of relevance, right? And so being a part of a community where everyone is at different stages is so beneficial because who wants to be, in a container with people who are just like them? So that is a great way to really kind of open up your mind, your perception, and really start to see things in a different way through other people's experiences, which is fantastic. Okay, so what I want to do is we talked about your community and we'll definitely touch on it at the end and so people can know where to find it. But for the physicians who are embarking into entrepreneurship, um I know that there's a lot of interest in wanting to put together live
A
events
retreat.
and
Yeah.
especially retreats. So we're going to switch into
Yeah.
newer mode to get your experience through it. So, from the business perspective, what encouraged you to host a retreat and why did you decide on Portugal?
Yes. Um, so, uh So the main reason why I wanted to go ahead and start with retreats is that having a place where, women could come together and really have that face-to-face connection in a small group that's intimate, where you really get to know people over a series of days. So much of that, especially when you're in a new place, you really can shed and transform rapidly
Mhm,
because just like I said, like that reframe is huge. There's infinite possibilities that happen when you're out there. There's a very interesting study that um, I learned about when I was in doing my PhD about they tracked all these people, men that came back from Vietnam who were addicted to drugs in
mhm.
Vietnam, and then they tracked their drug use afterwards. And there was one defining factor for men who came back and continued to use, and men who came back and didn't. Do you know what the factor was?
Their environment, who they were
Yeah,
around.
so the men who continued to use actually had previously used before
Mm,
they went to Vietnam.
mm,
So even if men came back and they were in a piss poor socioeconomic environment, if they hadn't used before, they didn't
mhm,
continue to use.
mm.
But if they had used before, they
Okay,
continued and they really spiraled. Because all of a sudden it wasn't, oh, they were using in Vietnam and now they're in a different place. So
right.
for human beings physically being somewhere else, especially when it's, I mean, who isn't transformed when you go to Portugal?
Right, right. Well,
Um,
I don't know if I'm fully grasping, so I don't wanna glaze over it. So, the people that were in Vietnam using drugs while they were out in this location, the people who went back home, the ones that started to use again
the ones who
were it
continued to use had previously used in their home environment before they went to Vietnam.
before. So, it's not the environment that the new environment, it's the environment that they came from.
Right, so it's being able, but the people who were in Vietnam that were using that when they went back home because it was a new environment, they stopped
Oh,
using.
so I'm looking at it the other way around.
Right,
Let's go back
right.
to the reframing.
Yeah. Right.
I'm looking at it the other way around.
Right,
So
right.
it's got it. Okay. So
Yeah,
then when
so
they
if you're
actually,
in and you the power of an environment is that
yes.
even something as they didn't go through a drug addiction program. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
get clean. It
Mm-hmm.
was simply like leaving that environment. And they have, I'm sure you've heard of retreats that they have for kids with very severe PTSD and severe trauma. Um, and or and unfortunately I know of a young woman who went through this after being brutally raped at like 14, and the power of being in the woods, right, the power of being in this retreat somewhere away was hugely therapeutic. And so
Mm-hmm.
the power of the environment for a human being cannot be um you know um minimized. And
Right.
that's why for a physician, your energy coming in, that presence is so important. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing in the retreat. If you're a retreat leader and you get to be in a beautiful place and you have this program that's really healing and you're coming in with this energy and then you get to have all these like women that want to come and do the same thing and being in this mission, it is
Mm-hmm.
really transformative and you get to see people break through and really move through. So that's really was the inspiration for me in terms of that. If there is any physician that wants to do a retreat, they can reach out to me. I can um, tell them my foibles,
Yeah. Well, let's get into a
like
few of
what
those right
not to
now.
do.
Let's get into a few of those right now. What lessons have you learned from actually throwing a retreat? Was this your first one?
But this was my very first. This is my
Okay.
very first one. I'm going to be
Perfect.
doing some more. And this is my very first one. So the first thing is don't expect to make any money out of your first retreat.
Okay.
Don't expect. If you can just run it not as a loss or too much of a loss, that's it. Now, that being said, if you're in a type of um, program or a type of of connections with people that you know that you can have a lot of people come in, that might be different. But the
Mhm.
one thing I learned also is that there will be a lot of people that will tell you that they're going to come, and then when it actually comes time, they won't.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is as a putting together a retreat, you think people are going to act the way that you would act.
Mhm.
So life happens. If life happens and I signed up for a retreat, I would pay for it. But
Right.
that's not the mentality of a lot of people. So I
Mhm.
think keep the venue is less important than you think. So I picked a venue that I had been to on a retreat and I loved it, but it was probably like the most expensive venue in Portugal. Don't do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Pick a
Mhm.
beautiful place and a beautiful thing, but it doesn't have to be super high end or super luxurious. What people care about is having their own bedroom with their own bathroom
Mhm.
and just being in a place where they can go out for a walk or they can kind of see something that's beautiful or that's natural. So you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about it being this high end kind of thing. So that was
Okay.
the other thing that I learned.
I love that. No, that's really great tips. That's fantastic. And did you do it at like a hotel or did you get an Airbnb?
So, I did it at it's called Casa Fuzeta, Fuzetta, in Oahu, Portugal.
Uh-huh.
And so the way that it runs is basically you rent the entire house for a week, and
Okay.
then you bring in your own chef and you do this. And so I had I had it where I would have earned like a little bit of money, and then a lot of people life happened and a lot of people canceled,
Mhm.
and it was hard for me to sort of say to them, well, I really think you ought to pay because this and that, I'm a pretty much a sob story. And so um so it went out to where um I was like, we can't afford a chef because we're really going to run in the red. And so I
Mhm.
told my husband, I was like, so I have an idea for this cook. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, So he did. So he actually,
Yeah,
my husband, not only God bless him, but he did a fantastic job.
there you
Cooked
go.
for like 14 people. He'd never worked in a restaurant before, never been like a chef, but he cooked for 14 people, like breakfast and dinner for like 5 days, 4 nights. So
Oh my god, that's amazing.
it
Look at you,
was. I
resourceful
was just
again.
like, oh my God. Everyone's like, the food's delicious. I was like, I know. I was like, married this man. I was like, I did good.
That is so funny. I love that. Well, it all came together. So thank you for sharing that
Yeah. So
with
just
us
if
on the
you're going
back
to
end.
host a retreat, your first retreat, be ready to pivot, be ready to reframe, be ready to do what you need to do because a lot of things will happen and come up. And it's your job to be able to pivot, to be able to reframe and still bring in that energy and that joy. And at the end, just like I was funny because I said, this is a little bit about my own inner work.
Mhm.
This is a little bit about detached attachment from my
Mhm.
first retreat.
Mhm.
It's about the doing, not the outcome.
Absolutely.
And I have to let go of worrying about this and worrying about that and understanding that it's a process, that it's a journey, that a lot I am going to learn from this first retreat that would be hugely helpful on so many different aspects. And
Mhm.
so I did that and I processed that before the retreat and it was wonderful and life-changing for me. And at the end, I said, okay, so I lost about the same amount of money that I would have if I went on a retreat. And I did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Maybe a little bit more work on my end, but
Yeah. Well, essentially, and like you said, you did get something from it, and I think that we tie the outcome to something monetary, but there that is part of the journey, and that's part of the becoming. And through that experience, you're going to continue it to evolve, and then learn how to do the
yeah,
next
my
one.
next retreat for sure, I'm going to earn a little bit of money
Yes,
for sure, because I know these like other kind of foibles, and like I said, I have it all kind of figured out. So
and you
yes,
wouldn't been able to get to that conclusion unless
of
you actually
course not.
threw a retreat. Yeah,
Yes, that's right.
so
And
that's
my
wonderful.
husband who was like, "Do you want me to cook for the next one?" He had
Yeah.
so much fun. I was just like, "Really?" I was like,
That
"All
is
right."
amazing. Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. I loved this was really good. This is impactful. You actually taught me something about just kind of reframing and shifting the way you look at things. I thought that I
No,
had a pretty good,
thanks.
concept, but with people who have really big visions, sometimes it does feel overwhelming because it's like how much change can I really make? And you find yourself I'm very future focused,
Right.
so thinking about the overall picture and I think the main thing that you taught me in this conversation is to just focus on the impact you're making in the
For
present
sure.
moment and let those things evolve the way that they need to, right? Those are the little moments that you actually do have control over and, detach from the ultimate outcome because when you're on your path, you know that it's going to
Mm,
happen the way that it's supposed to happen. And so just trust that and just focus on what you can provide in this very moment. And more importantly, that is enough.
yes.
That's enough. Like, we always feel like we could be doing more. Like, I feel like I could be doing more. I feel like I wanna be useful in all of these different ways. But knowing that what you are providing in this very moment is enough is such a profound, concept that I was able to extract from this conversation. So, thank you so much for sharing your
Oh,
energy with us.
yeah.
Doctor is it Yolanda's okay? Dr.
Yep.
Yolanda,
Yep.
tell us where if you're a medical mom, where they can find the community and how else our listeners can connect with you as well.
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn under Yolanda Bogart MD, and then the community is actually in Facebook. It's under Yolanda Bogart MD, but it's medical moms with ASD kids. And
Mm,
so medical moms with ASD kids. So reach out to me either on LinkedIn or on Facebook. And I would love to build up this community. This is a big mission and purpose for me to have this and to have a place where us moms can really focus on ourselves, on the work that we need to do to heal ourselves so that we can be there for our kids and for our patients, and just for the world. And, it's has a lot of really practical, pragmatic tips. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of neuroscience basis that I use it because there's nothing I always say that the problem I had with changing myself is that I wasn't smart enough to outsmart my brain.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there's a lot of things our brain does to kind of keep us in the same patterns that we've always had, even if they're negative patterns, even if they're not getting us to where we need to go. And so there's a lot of, I call them tips and tricks, but there's actually a lot of neuroscience underneath that to for it to work.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you guys so much for listening in. I really appreciate it. You are listening to Recalibrated Vision. My name's Bianca Ariel, and I guys want you to remember to always and forever stay free. See you next time.
Like
Bye.